Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
January 26th. Uh, and the big news in my household, Matt, is that we finished season one of White Lotus. I know you finished season one of White Lotus. You finished both seasons, actually, right? You blew through season
Yep.
two.
Yeah, I just
So
finished season two.
I can't talk season two yet. We started, but I'm
Okay.
only I forget if we're 2 or 3 episodes in. Um, but you thought that season one had a conservative message, right?
I think so, yes. Yes. And by the way, let me say
Can
I
you?
liked season one better than season two. Season two is
Because
good, but I like season one better. But yes, I think season
that's
one.
not that's not conventional wisdom, right?
Well, I thought that I was going against the grain, and then when I tweeted that opinion out, and I got a million people saying, A, I agree with you, and B, why are
Mm.
you like everyone knows this? So I thought it was conventional wisdom, but I guess
Mm.
not.
I may feel like this show only got on my radar because everyone was raving about season two. I didn't even realize it was a season one until I
Yeah.
looked into it.
So season one, in my opinion, is the themes are about like wealth and class and race, and there's in my opinion, a political commentary on that. Whereas season two is more about sex and sex work. Um,
Mhm.
And so I just felt that one was better for a variety of reasons, but including I thought that the political commentary was a little bit sharper and more relevant, at least to me.
Yeah, but I don't. I mean, they're definitely mocking uh, hypocrisy amongst wealthy liberals. Um, but I didn't think that equates with being conservative.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, as I said last week, some of it may be a Rorschach test. Someone else
Mm.
might watch this episode and see it differently. Um, I think, and I'm not suggesting that this is like, William F. Buckley wrote this or something.
Right, right.
But for an HBO show, I felt like the themes, some of the political themes of it, made points that, in this day and age, in the context of this day and age, where Bill Maher is basically a conservative, right? That it stressed those kind of themes. I felt like the young people who were sort of woke were portrayed as being spoiled and out of touch, and in fact kind of villainous. And the adults who were kind of old school liberals who thought that political correctness had run amok were portrayed as more right, but still flawed. It's a complex, nuanced view, but more right.
Mm.
But there are other. That's just one of the of kind of the many themes I think of the show.
Um, I'm probably not the best person to comment on this, just that I don't take in enough pop culture these days. So forgive me for going out of my comfort zone. Um, but my general sense of where things are going, we definitely have a huge shift amongst younger people politically and culturally, um, and so you get uh, a lot more emphasis on uh, race, class, gender, uh, and in a lot of pop culture these days. And so I think that White Lotus is sort of a classic example of that. All those things are kind of coming together and creating a lot of the conflict in the story. Um, I don't think it was attempting to dump on the general progressive direction of culture, but it was incorporating uh, that some people mouth these things without really believing it or understanding it, its full implications or whatnot. Um, uh,
Yeah, I
and
mean
so
the
I
easy thing
wonder
to
if
do. the easy thing to do, and it does. I mean, obviously, it's a commentary on how rich people are like sometimes out of touch, sometimes spoiled. Um, by the way, one of the themes that I thought was really interesting, and this carries over, I think, into season two, is the employees, the people who work at this fancy resort. They've got lives and struggles, and it shows that side of it.
Mhm.
And some of them have problems and addictions, and you can see these kind of rich people coming up, constantly pestering them,
Mhm.
uh, would inflame sometimes their addictions and impact their personal lives. And as someone who has worked in the service industry in my past,
Mhm.
I can identify with that, and that is something, we've seen with like Downton Abbey. They have like,
Mhm.
the rich people, and then you've got the servant class, and
Mhm.
that's kind of the first show that I remember seeing that really showed both sides of it like that. But I think White Lotus takes it to another level
Mhm.
and shows how, you know, being someone who works at a resort where you always have to be smiling, always have to be
Mhm.
happy, always have to be solving problems for rich people, like that takes a toll on your on your life.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that is something that I had not really seen portrayed that much. So I thought that was another good thing.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's the first show to explore class division. It's not the first show to explore racial tension. It's not the first show to explore hypocrisy amongst the wealthy, liberal or otherwise. I mean, I didn't see it, but I understand Get Out was very much a mockery of the
Yes.
superficial white
By the way, I
liberal.
highly recommend Get Out. Very good movie.
Mhm. Um,
Liked it a lot.
so, uh, so I don't think this is all that new. I mean, the way things come together and the complexity and the confluence of all these themes, might have unique elements to it. Uh, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I wonder if culturally w- we are tracking how we are moving politically, which I think is at the same time still kind of moving in a progressive direction in a lot of ways, but with elements of backlash to it. I mean, the squad is not riding high right now, um, and there's more exploration of excess and what was being pushed. In the two Bernie Sanders campaigns, for example, there's more space for that in the discourse. Um, so, and then and those kind of complexities and tensions make for great art.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been easy. It would have been easy for them to just make the show where the rich people are out of touch. And they did
Mhm.
that. But then they had this undercurrent where the rich people, by virtue of being so privileged, had these kind of spoiled kids, who don't appreciate the hard work that the rich people did to get where they are. And I would argue that the most sort of villainous act portrayed in the whole show and season one is perpetrated by virtue of someone who embraces this kind of victim woke ideology, and that is
Mhm.
what sets off what I would believe to be the most villainous act perpetrated in season one.
Mhm.
So
One other thing I would say, which is not really about politics, more about parenting, because I there's a little snippet at the end of season one where Mike White talks about the themes of the show, and I love Mike White from School of Rock. He was Jack Black's friend in School of Rock, and I believe he wrote. Did he write and direct? No, he didn't direct. I think he wrote the script, or at least co-wrote the script. Um, School of Rock's one of my favorites. Anyway, he talked about um, uh, the tension between wanting your kids to get off of screens, but then what do they do when they're off the screens? It's not
totally.
necessarily
Yep.
much better. And without giving away, the plot of the ending of season one, like how that storyline played out, sort of, it spoke to me as a parent, as a kid,
Yeah.
um, because I definitely, as a teen, like just you want to get out and like felt constrained by so when the tail end of adolescence, like you're ready to get out, but you can't get out quite yet. That tension, like I definitely that definitely spoke to me.
Dude,
And as a parent,
I've got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. Man, it's tough. I feel your
yeah.
pain. I know. And
And
now
right
it's
now, like
funny as a consumer of entertainment, I'm interpreting everything differently as a father as
mhm.
opposed to being not a father or a father of like a tweens. I'm interpreting like when I watch those shows now, instead of me seeing myself as like the kid with the annoying parents, I see myself as the dad, in
Right,
that show.
right.
And it's a different perspective. It totally is a different perspective.
Well, the thing that I see totally differently now that as a kid is Calvin and Hobbes. Like you read Calvin and Hobbes as an adult, and like it hits you so differently than when you read it as a kid. And which is Calvin Hobbes is one of the greatest works of art, period, in my opinion. It holds up so well, and it's totally timeless. But anyway, we're probably going down way too many
Oh,
tracks.
okay. On a different note, before we move to politics, I also want to put a plug in. I just finished season 1 of The Bear. Have you heard of this on Hulu?
I've heard a little bit about it, but I don't know much about it.
So it's about a guy who's like a Michelin star chef, who his brother dies, sort of like of an overdose or something unexpectedly, and so he moves back to run this little kind of dive restaurant that his brother uh, owns in Chicago, and it's got all sorts of kind of urban problems as well as financial issues um, in Chicago, and so that is worth checking out. One season is all that there is of now, but when you're done White Lotus season 2, Bill, think
I
about
did.
that one as your next.
I did watch the first 2 episodes of the new Night Court, and I think the first 2 of that '90s show. I did manage to work those in my busy schedule.
Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Both underwhelmed, but I was expecting to be underwhelmed. If you're a hardcore fan, like you can watch them. They're not completely without merit, but neither one is meeting the level of quality of their predecessors.
Does the new Night Court still have the original theme?
They in a modified version,
Okay.
modified and shortened. But yeah, my basic view of any TV or movie is you have good characters, nothing else matters. You could have the lamest plot lines, formulaic trash. If they're good, sharply defined characters, like you care about what happens to them, and the rest doesn't matter. And I don't think the new Night Court has hit it with the collection of characters. Both like the main, the judge, the DA, the bailiff, the clerk, like they're not meeting the level of what they were before, and the people that come in the court, the defendants that come in, aren't quite reaching that level of craziness from before. And that '90s show, the kids are not gelling the way the original group of kids did. So it's nice to see Red and Kitty still around, and the cameos are fun. Like the kids they're fine. Like it's not like it's terrible. These things are obviously harder to execute than they look from the outside, but that's where it feels underwhelming to me.
And on that happy note, where do you want to talk? Where do you want to go? What do you want to talk about?
We just talked about it before we got on the air, and now I forget. What was the thing that you just wrote about?
Well, one idea I had, I've not written about this yet, but one thing I wanted to note is that Pat Buchanan has retired his column.
Right, that was it.
Yes.
That was it.
And I think it deserves some talk because I think Pat Buchanan is a dramatically underrated nowadays at least, probably underappreciated political figure. And this is a guy, I thought about it. If you go back to every elected president of my lifetime, Pat Buchanan every elected Republican president of my lifetime, Pat Buchanan played a major role in some capacity, right? So he works for Richard Nixon, famously advises Richard Nixon. I think that's when he came up with the silent majority line. I believe that's Pat, or at least he popularized it. He works for Nixon as his, I think, political director or communications director, sort of a senior advisory role. He runs against George H.W. Bush in New Hampshire and potentially hobbles him, and then gives that 92 speech, which potentially hobbles Bush, right? Then he inadvertently.
What do you do for Reagan?
He was, I think, his communications director. So then he inadvertently gets George W. Bush elected. I don't remember, because a lot of people, thousands of people accidentally voted for Pat Buchanan.
Right.
And then I think you could argue he paves the way for Donald Trump in a sense. That Pat Buchanan's kind of America First nationalism, populism finally arrives with Donald Trump. So that's the last 5 elected. I don't count Jerry Ford in there because he wasn't elected, but the last 5 elected Republican presidents, I believe, all of them of my lifetime, Pat Buchanan played a significant role in. But that doesn't even count the fact that he was at the top of his game at our game, Bill. This is a guy who was a columnist and a top political commentator back in the days when there weren't that many. There were only a couple of channels. This is a guy who was on Crossfire for years. He was on the McLaughlin Group back when it was so important that even Saturday Night Live was doing skits about it. It's a guy at the top of his game. I can tell you, one of the nicest people that you'll ever meet, one of the kindest, nicest people. I think he's a happy warrior on air when he talks. Even if he's saying hardcore things, he's saying them sort of in a smile with a sort of a genteel, happy warrior way. But in person, one of the nicest people I've met in this entire business. And not just to people like me, but you ask makeup artists, you ask drivers, who's the nicest person to you? It's Pat Buchanan. I've heard it so many times, Bill. And then, of course, the last thing I would say that we have to think about with Pat Buchanan, well, I didn't even mention the fact that he's also a book author and has written maybe a dozen books. I think that's where he got into a lot of his trouble in terms of allegations of racism or anti-Semitism. And I don't think you can dismiss these out of hand, even if you're a conservative. I mean, he has been criticized by Bill Buckley for being an anti-Semite and by Donald Trump for Donald Trump called him a racist or something like that in 2000.
Right.
So I hope and expect he will live many, many years, but I just wanted to take this opportunity as he retires his column. I think this is a guy who is incredibly significant, who probably young people today do not fully appreciate the life and the career that he had.
So I just finished reading Richard Nixon, The Life by John Farrell, which is excellent. If you don't think Nixon's interesting copy, like, that's just wrong. Like, this is really just an incredible story of a person's life, as horrible as it may have been in the net of it all.
Mistakes were made, Bill.
So at one point, because Nixon was not all that much of an ideologue, and that upset Buchanan. At one point, Buchanan composed a long memo to Haldeman entitled "Neither Fish Nor Fowl," describing with alarm Nixon's image as a, quote, political transient, unquote, who governed like the, quote, bubble in the carpenter's level, unquote. Quote, "We suffer from the widely held belief that the president has no grand vision that inspires him, no deeply held political philosophy that guides and explains his words, decisions, and deeds. For better, the president is viewed as the quintessential political pragmatist, standing before an ideological buffet, picking some from this tray and from that, which served Nixon quite well. I mean, he won re-election in a landslide against what was seen as an ideologue, but that definitely rankled Buchanan.
Who was, by the way, I will say about Pat Buchanan, he was a conviction politician when he ran, and he had been a free marketer, but he became an economic nationalist. He was an isolationist after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But he was a conviction politician, and you might not like his convictions, but he had them. He has them.
That's unmistakably true. I mean, there's two questions like to ask about assessing Buchanan's legacy. One is just was he a force for good or for bad? I mean, as you point out, even some prominent conservatives. I mean, Buckley had an exhaustive. They dedicated the whole issue to is Pat Buchanan anti-Semite? And his answer was yes. So,
well, I think his answer was, I don't think Pat is an anti-Semite, but he says and does anti-Semitic things. I think that was more. That summarizes Buckley's take, which is,
still pretty bad.
Partisan work.
And I mean, he basically he had an America First isolationist foreign policy that was rooted in we shouldn't have gone into World War II. That's a deep. I mean, those are the original America Firsters, and a number like Charles Lindbergh was an America Firster before the war, but then when the war started, he actually lied to get back into the military and run bomber raids. And I'd say Charles Lindbergh was a great guy because he was a horrible person, but in many, many ways. But he at least did that. And Buchanan was resolute that this was that we shouldn't have done
it. So for those who are not kind of familiar with his oeuvre, Pat's book, a couple of Pat's books essentially argue that World War I and World War II both destroyed like hundreds of millions of essentially white European Christians. And that's like the suicide of the West, essentially. And Buchanan argued that that Hitler didn't want to go after America, didn't want to go after England, wanted to go after Russia. We should have this is Pat. We should have left them. We should have let those two beat each other up, take each other on, and basically that is his take. And as you could imagine, that is a controversial take to have. I mean, behind me, Bill, you can see it. The audience can't probably, but I've got Winston Churchill, on my wall. Pat Buchanan, not a big Winston Churchill fan, to give you an idea of the kind of sort of contrarian iconoclast that he is.
And let's also keep in mind, like his bigotry, I think, didn't just arguably reside with just Jews. There's just some quotes here from back when he was running for president in 1992. This is late 1991. Quote, David Duke is busy stealing from me. I have a mind to go down there and sue that dude for intellectual property theft. I think God made all people good, but if we had to take in 1 million immigrants in, say, Zulus next year or Englishmen and put them in Virginia, which group would be easier to assimilate and would cause less problems to the people of Virginia? I think there's a lot of problematic elements to Pat Buchanan, but he represented a faction of the Republican Party back then. So he doesn't win the 92 primary, but he makes enough. He plants enough of a flag in it that George H.W. Bush says, "I got to give this guy a primetime convention address to keep the party unified," and does the infamous culture war address, which was terrible politically in the short run, at minimum. But I remember, because I was in college at the time in Ohio, and Sherrod Brown was running for Congress for the first time in my district, and the debate was actually on campus. I went to the debate, and I remember Sherrod Brown saying, "I was listening to the Republican convention in Berlin. I mean Houston."
Yeah. What was it? Molly Ivins or someone said it was better in the original German.
Right.
But look, I'll say this about Pat Buchanan. One of the things I like about him, unlike Donald Trump, not only is he a happy warrior, he's a writer, and he like Donald Trump could like that speech, and it's got a lot. If you listen to it today, I think there are parts of it that are inspiring, parts of it that are insightful, and obviously parts of it that sound even worse today than they did in 1992. You know what I mean? But he can speak. Pat Buchanan did poetry. And Donald Trump can't do that, doesn't do that. And I do think that there are parts of what Pat Buchanan was advocating that I rejected at the time, because even though I've always liked Pat Buchanan, I've always disagreed with him philosophically on a lot. But if, in hindsight, if we had co-opted, and this is what this is very controversial, but Pat Buchanan wanted to co-opt some of the some of the inoffensive parts of David Duke's program. I would say if the Republican Party had done a better job of co-opting some of the economic populism points, like having to do with like NAFTA, for example, some of the economic populism stuff that Pat Buchanan was talking about, if the Republican Party, and again, I was rejecting all of that at the time, but if we had done a better job of co-opting some of that and incorporating some of that, maybe Donald Trump doesn't come along. You know, maybe.
I mean, he is the guy who did it.
I
Pat
know.
Buchanan tried to do it, and Donald Trump succeeded at it. Both of them had many horrible aspects to them. That's what. Obviously, you can academically say you can be protectionist and not be racist. The two things are, intertwined. Yet they seem to come together very well for these two people, because they spoke to a aversion to change that had appeal to people who were older and white. So I don't know who was the figure out there that was going to cleave that and just be economic populist and not bring in all the other stuff.
Well, I mean, someone like a Mike Huckabee or a Rick Santorum, they would have had other sort of hangups too, but I think that they wouldn't have been as bad as Trump, and they would. I mean, Rick Santorum, when he ran for president in 2012 against Mitt Romney, was really making a lot of hay out of the economic populism stuff. Remember, he wanted to really favor manufacturing and the tax code and stuff like that. And he ended up winning Iowa. He didn't get a bump because Iowa can't count votes. They botched it. But then Santorum wins Iowa. He goes to New Hampshire, and he gets caught up in this debate with a student about gay marriage or something. And I think that basically ended the mini boomlet.
I mean, maybe I'm not aware of Santorum saying things that are explicitly racist. Maybe he didn't. I'm just not remembering them. But he always had animus towards people who weren't heterosexual, and that also speak to that general appetite on the far right for being resistant to cultural change. So all that stuff seems to, on the right side of the fence when you talk about protectionism, that stuff seems to come together.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is Pat Buchanan, he's a graduate of Gonzaga, graduate of Georgetown, pre-Vatican II, whatever. He's a devout Catholic, okay? Rick Santorum, devout Catholic. Mike Huckabee, Baptist, I think, preacher.
Yeah, Baptist, yeah.
Donald Trump, vulgarian. I think it's I think it is also not an accident. Now, Donald Trump was also famous, so there's other differences, but I think that Trump was able to actually win as a populist partly because he was not religious. That wasn't really part of his thing.
Though
I think it helped him,
I
ironically.
mean, he obviously found a way to get those people on board. They were not with him in the primary, and he got them in afterwards. Wait, let's go back to Buchanan. Though. One of the things you're focusing on was that, I mean, he had an intelligence, and he had a wit, and he had a style. He was engaging. He was nice in person. I think all those things, because there was a controversy of, well, at some point where people were like, why is this guy still on TV? Why are we still allowing this guy to have a perch in the media when he said all these hateful things? There was a time when Rachel Maddow and Pat Buchanan were regular sparring partners on MSNBC. That was like part of the end of it, because my MSNBC viewers were like, why the hell are we listening to Pat Buchanan? But Maddow and Buchanan was good TV.
He was great TV. I mean, him and like Chris Matthews, for example. I love that. Now, young people look at that and they're so turned off by these two kind of old guys, and they're old fashioned mores, and all that entails, good and bad. I like the happy warrior. I like I'm sure Pat and Chris Matthews would go out and have a beer after they did that occasionally. I like that.
That's what too.
Yeah, and but what did Pat in at MSNBC, I think, is, here's my guess. I have no inside information, but I think Phil Griffin told him probably, do not write this book. Pat was going to write like another book, Suicide of the West, or I don't even know which one it was. But the book, I think it was the book, and the book had to do with the decline of white America, the decline of whites, the decline of Christians, and Western civilization. And I believe that is what did him in. But my guess is he was warned, like, we'd like to keep you here, just don't do this, don't write the book. That's kind of my hunch, and he did it.
But it like, to my mind, Buchanan is a reminder that being college educated, being intelligent, being knowledgeable about history, being an engaging speaker, being thoughtful, doesn't automatically mean that you have decent ideas. You can still have very hateful, divisive, corrosive ideas and have all these other positive qualities. And I think because Buchanan was probably a fun guy to be around and was good TV, like knew all the pundits and knew all the editors, he was their friend. So sort of easy to be like, oh, Pat thinks we shouldn't have fought Hitler. Oh, Pat, silly Pat. Pat doesn't want black people to be immigrants. Oh, that's crazy, Pat. And so he was able to hang around for a very long time. And obviously you could argue that, well, why shouldn't he? Because he represents a viewpoint, and you should be able to battle that viewpoint out in public. And doesn't mean that he's right, but we live in a world where people have horrible ideas, and they should be aired out and engaged. So you can make that justification too.
Well, especially in the Trump era. I mean, it's ironic that Pat's voice as a commentator kind of receded at the time Trump was kind of coming on the scene, because, again, you could really argue that Pat laid the groundwork, intellectually, philosophically, for that Trump finally was able to win the nomination on.
Well, this is sort of another question assessing Pat Buchanan's legacy. It's obviously easy to say that Pat Buchanan ran on things that Trump also ran on and succeeded with. Therefore, Pat Buchanan is the precursor to Trump. I don't think it definitively proves the point that you needed Buchanan to get to Trump. I don't know how to adjudicate it, myself. When Pat Buchanan did it, he did not do well electorally. He basically had he had a halfway decent showing in one primary in 1992 to make George H.W. Bush, knock back on his heels. He won New Hampshire in 96, but petered out after that. When he ran as the Reform Party candidate in 2000, he was a non-factor. Um, and then he went back to being a pundit again. So did that really stoke the appetite for right-wing populism, or did it just really go very dormant for 16 years after that? And Trump, who wasn't even running as a right-wing populist in 2000 when he had his half-baked presidential campaign, was trying to run much more as a centrist, was embracing single-payer healthcare at the time.
I think Pat was just ahead of his time. So what happened is, I think Pat, by winning New Hampshire in 96, by giving Bush a run for his money in 92, demonstrated that there was a strain on the right in the Republican Party, a minority, but a growing strain that was populist, that was nationalist. But see, you got to realize when Pat's running and he's complaining about like NAFTA, the effects of NAFTA hadn't fully kicked in. The effects of globalization hadn't fully kicked in. He's at the front end of this, warning about it, just like Ross Perot, another sign, I think, of what was to come. They're warning about what's going to happen. But then you've got, I think you need to have 9/11 happen. I think you need to have the Great Recession happen. I think you need to have also, so basically it
well, maybe Obama happened. Obama was obviously pushing things culturally, more so in the second term than the first, in terms of immigration and gun control, and he was pushing free, the TPP trade agreement along with that. So again, the cultural progressivism and the economic globalization happening at the same time with Obama. Trump's able to then light that match.
Yeah, and then the other thing that happens is the reordering. So I think that like Pat Buchanan was trying to win a Republican Party primary full of Republicans. By the time Trump comes along, I think there were a lot more white kind of working class Democrats who had left the Democratic Party in those 16 years since Pat left the political scene, and they'd come over into the Republican Party. And so I think that's part of the reason why Trump not being religious actually benefited him as opposed to someone like Santorum. So I think that the reordering helped as well. There were a lot of these kind of working class, Roseanne Barr, Michael Moore kind of people who voted for Trump, but they weren't eligible to vote for Pat Buchanan. And they would have been turned off by his religiosity in any event.
So made a segue into 2024. I think it's still a bit of an open question to what extent the Buchanan ideology is the basis of the current Republican Party. To what extent did Trump win in the first place based on that mix of policy ideas, and to what extent was it just his own celebrity? And to what extent did the issues matter? How much it was just the more bigoted cultural stuff, and how much it was the economic stuff? So this is coming to a bit of a head now because Trump is telling the current group of congressional Republicans, don't cut Social Security and Medicare. Don't make that a central focus point of your negotiations with Biden over raising the debt ceiling and keeping the government open. Now, it's a bit murky to what extent Republicans want to do this anyway, because McCarthy is not saying it. I just wrote about this for the Washington Monthly. So you do have a large faction of the House Republican Conference called the Republican Study Committee. In fact, they make up 3/4 of the conference. Although, as sometimes with these things, people sign a paper. I'm in this conference. I'm in this caucus. Doesn't mean they sign every aspect of the platform, But there is an RSC budget that calls for, they don't like to say cuts. They'll say we want to reform the program for future retirees, tweak these formats, but obviously it amounts to benefit cuts relative to what they would be otherwise. And they also talk about privatization of Social Security. They talk about higher Medicare premiums for higher income beneficiaries, which is obviously a means test, kind of a cut. So certain members of the Republican Study Committee have said we should be talking about these things now. Others have been more coy or saying, well, this is not really the time to talk about it at this moment. But Trump dives into this intra-party discussion because there isn't a consensus view of what the Republican Party is actually asking for right now. Trump barrels in and says, don't cut Social Security and Medicare. I'm going to stake my claim there, make a kind of video about it, and make that really a part of. He's a candidate now. He's running for president. He's saying this is part of my platform. All you old white people, he doesn't say it like this. All you old white people who like it for these reasons, I'm never going to mess your Social Security the way these other bastards want to do it. Buchanan never made I don't think Buchanan ever took that stance. But it is sort of along the lines of being an economic populist. So I don't know how you feel, if you think Trump is doing a smart play, because that is important for Republicans to take that off the table, because Republicans don't want it. And Henry Olsen has written about this recently, that the polls show that Republican voters don't want this, conservative voters don't want this. Or is that not really the thing that animates Republicans these days?
Well, I think it's axiomatic that cutting Social Security and entitlements are not popular. But I would say this: if Republicans are not going to cut entitlements and they're not going to cut the defense budget, then they're not going to fix. Then they're just not going to fix our problem, because it's not going to happen with waste, fraud, and abuse. It's just not. And so that is the question. Like, do they really? Is the debt problem? We have to tackle it before it tackles us, or whatever Paul Ryan. Like, is it that important all of a sudden?
Well, I think that's sort of the bigger question. Do we actually have a debt problem that's acute and urgent? We know that the debt is very high right now. That's more than 100% of GDP, which is historically high, not the highest of all of world history, but high. Does that create immediate problems that have to be solved in a dramatic, abrupt, and draconian fashion or not? Or can you gradually reduce your debt load over the course of several decades?
But I think either way, regardless
of, adjudicated.
But I would say either way, even if you just want to reduce it, if you're taking like entitlements off the table and defense spending off the table, you're not going to do it. It's just not going to happen. And so we're not to the point yet as a nation where we have decided we can't go on like this forever. We have to make some dramatic change. And we need, so personally, I think we do need to do entitlement reform, unlike Donald Trump, but it is going to be politically unpopular. And that's just the way it is. But if you're not going to do that, if you're not going to cut any Social Security at all, if you're not going to do means testing, you're not going to raise the age of retire, whatever, which I don't think are really radical ideas personally, but can't do it, hands off, right? Not popular, not going to debt. You're not going to do that. And I don't think we should be cutting defense spending. Then you're not going to solve the problem. And so that's where we are. I think this is an exercise in futility. And but I do think it could be serious. Ramesh Ponnuru has a column. He's a newly minted Washington Post columnist, a column in the Washington Post where he talks about why this standoff could be maybe more dangerous than past standoffs. And it's basically because Democrats think that Obama made a mistake negotiating with hostages at all, giving them any ground. That the Democrats should establish the premise that we do not negotiate over raising the debt ceiling, because it is a dangerous thing to establish that the premise. So if Democrats kind of hold their ground that we are not going to deal with these people, and Republicans simultaneously convince themselves that, hey, it's up to the Democrats if they want to destroy the economy or not. Like, if both sides are now dug in, which they may be, it could get ugly.
Well, there's a couple of big things I want to address there. First, quickly, I want to say that on Social Security and Medicare, there are some relatively immediate problems to solve, just objectively speaking. The Social Security Medicare trustees put out an annual report. They talk about when will the trust funds become insolvent, and for Social Security, that's in 10 years, and Medicare, that's in 3 years. And for Medicare, it's not all of Medicare; it's the hospital insurance trust fund, because the other parts are more handled with immediate tax revenue. Now, the payroll tax is always coming in to fund these things, but money's coming in, money's coming out. Is there a mismatch in the cash flow? So as it stands, Social Security the trust fund would deplete in 10 years. Payroll tax still come in, so you could pay something, but you couldn't pay everything. And Medicare depletes in 3 years. Now, so you got to do something to extend solvency. But that doesn't mean you have to totally overhaul the program. It doesn't mean you have to do privatization. You have to do a jacked up retirement age. It's a question of revenue and payment. So you can raise the taxes. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have a proposal that expands benefits while extending solvency for 75 years, because they jack up the payroll tax. There's a cap on the payroll tax after $250,000, you don't pay payroll tax. They eliminate that, and they add other taxes too. So there's multiple ways you can extend solvency. It doesn't require changing the fundamental nature of the program, but to address it in a non-ideological way requires both sides to sort of put down their swords. Because right now, if Republicans push dramatic reforms, Democrats can beat them aside the head, and they win that argument every single time. So there's no incentive on their part to say, well, let's talk about ways we can do this more calmly. But there's only so much time. Like, they will eventually have to get to that point. And Social Security, you can't do through reconciliation by law. So they have to do this in a bipartisan way eventually. Yeah. Probably not this year, but eventually. So that one point.
Yeah, at some point it will require raising taxes and raising the retirement age and means testing.
I wouldn't assume that, but that is one way to do it, and maybe you can do some of those things in kind of a light way. So you can do some of the tax things in a light way, and everyone kind of it hurts a little bit on all sides, but it doesn't, again, totally change the nature of the program. I mean, there's already a degree of means testing as it is. I mean, there's already redistributed elements to it, so it's a question of degree. Anyway, to the other point about the history of the debt limit fight, I just want to refresh the Obama history here. Tea Party happens in 2010. Republicans take over the House. Big budget negotiations occur, and to avoid the debt limit issue, a debt limit breach, they come up with the super committee. The super committee was going to be this big bipartisan committee to figure out how to reduce the deficit in a bipartisan way, and they had a backstop, which is if we can't come to an agreement, then the sequester kicks in. There's automatic brutal cuts. Defense, non-defense, not entitlements, but defense, non-defense, and they'll be so abrupt and painful. It'll be an incentive to come to a more reasonable agreement. They don't come to a reasonable agreement. The sequester does kick in, and then in the next debt limit fight, where Obama does say, "I'm not negotiating this again. You are going to do a clean debt limit." and they were trying to like defund Planned Parenthood and defund Obamacare. This is 2013. And in that fight, the Republicans lose completely. And Obama does hold the line, and they loosen the sequester along the way. So in a bipartisan way. So I don't think it's right to say Obama has taught Democrats bad lessons. They end on a good lesson. You can hold the line here because Republicans will, if they're forcing other issues onto this, one bit of basic governmental maintenance, they're going to look like the jerks, and they'll cave. So that's kind of where Biden's trying to be right now, and where I think right now the debate is getting
that lesson could be dangerous. I think Democrats learned that Republicans are going to be blamed for this if they do it, because it'll be their fault. And I think Republicans have convinced themselves, like, we can't back down, we can't blink. Mm-hmm. And I mean, John Boehner's not there. It's a different Republican Party now, Bill. So that's why I think is Ramesh Ponnura's argument that this is a little more dangerous than you might think.
I agree with that. I am definitely less trusting that they can land the plane, because I don't trust Kevin McCarthy to have the spine to do it. And you can get around McCarthy with a discharge petition, which Democrats are already talking about, which is a way to force a bill on the floor. But there's a lot of procedural hurdles to that. You can't do it in a day. It requires several months. So you basically have to draft the clean debt ceiling hike now, so it exists, and start collecting signatures for it. And even the moderate Republicans saying, look, we don't want a debt limit breach, but we're going to have to do some kind of deficit reduction here. Like, they can't negotiate that on the front end. They got to write the bill now, clean, and hopefully that they would get to some kind of side agreement, down the line. So it's complicated, and perfectly legitimate to be worried that they can't pull it off. And I think what's also, I think, I hear Manchin, Biden saying we're not going to negotiate. Manchin saying, well, you have to negotiate. What's confusing is that they have to pass appropriations bills, either individually or together in an omnibus, or doing things on autopilot with a continuing resolution. They got to do one of those three things by September 30th. So, they have to negotiate. Like, they literally have to negotiate. There's no way to do it unilaterally. Republicans control the House. House and Senate and Biden have to agree on something to fund the government by September 30th. But the debt limit needs to be resolved before then. That needs to be resolved probably by June. So the question is not, do you have to negotiate? The question is, do you have to negotiate about the debt limit? Do you have to conflate the two things? Like, Biden and McCarthy can negotiate budget stuff right now if they can rhetorically agree this is not about the debt limit. And right now, most Republicans are saying, we know we got to increase the debt limit. I've only seen lately I think it's Bob Good. I think it was Good, who was like, I don't want to raise the debt limit. I'm not sure anyone else has actually gone that far publicly.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh, she said that too? Okay. So look,
she said she wouldn't vote. She actually said she wouldn't sign a clean debt.
Well, Clint, that's different. That's different. I mean, saying you don't want to clean is different than saying you don't want to do it at all. Yeah. And Good is saying he doesn't want to do it.
At all. Okay. That is different.
Maybe he would do it if there was a dramatic budget agreement that he would approve on. But he was basically saying,
I'm not paying my credit card bills anymore either. I'm refusing to pay my credit card bills.
I think
so we are at the, just checking in with you here. I apologize for spending 15 minutes on White Lotus, but we are now at the 54-minute mark. Just to give you a sense of landing this plane.
Okay. Well, we can wrap up soon. But one thing I want to say is, I think enough Republicans have said, I know we got to raise the debt limit, to suggest to Democrats they're not going to shoot this hostage. And they can say to Republicans, look, I know we got to negotiate a budget agreement because we're going to hit that deadline in September. So, like, look, if you want to, you're going to probably get some kind of pound of flesh out of this. Just don't make it about the debt limit. Let's just take that off the table. You still have leverage in the budget talks because you control the House. So you don't need the debt limit to try to cut something here or there. We'll probably cut something. It's not going to be cutting off our arms and legs, but we're going to have to cut something because you have some votes here. So that's where I think they could get to landing the plane. But it's the sequencing of all that's complicated because obviously the debt limit looming over you puts everybody on edge. And the question is, who does it hurt more? Having the debt limits over here, who does it hurt more? Does it hurt Democrats because we don't want to have the global economy blow up on our watch? Or does it hurt Republicans more because they'll get blamed for that by being jerks? So perhaps Biden and McCarthy could say, look, this really doesn't help any of us, this debt limit stuff. Let's get that off the table. And look, we'll have a knockdown drag out by September. I guarantee you'll probably get something out of us from it.
All right. Well, I apologize. Multiple topics we did not get to, but I think we covered some good stuff. And
anything very, very quickly. We don't want to do 20 minutes on it. But what do you think about Nikki Haley inching into the 2024 race? We talked last week that they all seem scared. No one wants to go first and take Trump's wrath. There was an article saying there's some talk about a bunch of people entering at the same time, so he can't hit us all at once.
Hold hands and jump.
Do you think Haley is doing a smart thing by inching forward now?
I have these sort of two opposing viewpoints on Nikki Haley. On one hand, I saw her on Fox News with a special report with Bret Baier. She's so charming, so likable, very talented politician. And on the other hand, I just can't get past the fact that she's such a phony. And she criticizes Trump and then kisses his butt and then criticizes Trump. She said she wouldn't run against Trump. She said she wouldn't run. And now she has to my guess is that she has alienated almost everybody. If you're a diehard MAGA person, Nikki Haley's not your cup of tea. And if you don't like Trump, how could you trust her? Because she is sucked up to him so many times publicly, and she's just going back and forth. So it's like, if you try to be everything to everybody, you end up standing for nothing. And so on one hand, I feel like she's this very charming, talented, smart, attractive, I'll say it, politician. And on the other hand, I don't think we could trust her. And I feel like she's probably alienated so many of us. That's where I am. So I don't know.
The other candidate making a move is Pompeo with his book out, and the news out of the book. Because there's two bits of news that I've seen. One is that he says that Jared Kushner and I think Ivanka also were pushing to get Nikki Haley on the ticket and bump off Pence. And Haley said, "Well, I didn't do it. That wasn't me," which doesn't quite negate that Jared and Ivanka want to do it. And then his very glib recounting of the Khashoggi murder by the Saudi regime. Where he basically defends the Trump policy in maintaining ties to the Saudis. Some quotes from the book are, what made the media madder than a vegan in a slaughterhouse is our relationship with Saudi Arabia. He called Khashoggi an activist, only a journalist to the extent that I and many other public figures are journalists. We sometimes get our writing published, but we also do other things. He said he was cozy with the terrorist-supporting Muslim Brotherhood. And he said about Trump, in some ways, the president was envious that I was the one who gave the middle finger to the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the other bedwetters who didn't have a grip on reality. So the Washington Post had a very harsh statement in response to that. And then Pompeo responded to the Washington Post on Twitter saying, Americans are safer because we didn't label Saudi Arabia a pariah state. I never let the media bully me. Just because someone is a part-time stringer for the Washington Post doesn't make their life more important than our military serving in dangerous places and protecting us all. I never forgot that. And I responded myself on Twitter. This doesn't seem like a guy who thinks all life is the sanctity of life, which is something he's talked about in the abortion context. This is being very, very glib about a human being's life,
I
regardless
just,
of whatever.
I mean, Bill, I'm a conservative person and philosophy, but like, I just don't see how we can trust these people. I can't trust Pompeo, Pompeo, Pompeo,
Pompeo.
Pompeo. I have a weird thing trying to remember that guy's name. I can't trust him. I don't know. I don't know what he stands for. I can't trust Nikki Haley. Find her charismatic. Don't trust her. Some of these people are just very weird, and they've been. I don't know whether Trump revealed their character and exposed it, or what, but I think that they lack that sort of dignity that one needs. I do think that DeSantis and Youngkin, and I know DeSantis did that really despicable TV ad sucking up to Trump, but I think because DeSantis and Youngkin were from sort of a different generation, they came on the scene around, I mean, DeSantis was a congressman in the Tea Party, but nobody ever heard of him. I mean, they essentially became national figures after Trump was president,
Mm-hmm.
and they were governors. They weren't in the chain of command. So I think that DeSantis and Youngkin, for example, were not humiliated and exposed the way that like Ted Cruz and Nikki Haley and Mike Pence even and Pompeo have been. So I just don't think anybody from the Trump orbit like that DC. And the funny thing about Nikki Haley, Bill, is she managed to survive amazing, like miraculously, maybe because she was in New York. She managed to survive working for Trump only to get sucked in afterwards. That was the bizarre thing. She made it out, and then she decided, I'm going to destroy my career. She had walked this amazing fine line that was super impressive, and then effed it up retroactively. So I think that whoever is the next Republican, my guess is they will not be somebody who ran against him in 2016 or worked for him in his administration. That's my sense.
I mean, it's a pretty safe bet. It's very rare for people with a Washington base, administration officials. Very rare for those people like that to get nominated. All right, well, we should leave it on that note, I think.
Yeah, good talk, Bill. As always, anything you need to plug?
I can check out the piece I read about Social Security, Medicare, and Trump for the Washington Monthly. Otherwise, I think I'm good.
I had a really weird but interesting conversation with Cliff Bleszinski, who is a 25-year veteran of the video game industry and a very prominent video game designer. And we talked a lot about politics, actually, things like Gamergate, things like whether video games inspire mass shootings, things like screen time and addiction of video games. So it's not a normal podcast, but check it out at Matt Lewis and the News if that is your sort of thing.
All righty.
All right.
We'll see you back in the DMZ next week.
You got it. Have a good one, man.